My first impression of Bruce Lee, that he was a very confident young man. Ed Parker talks so highly of him as being a very proficient martial artist, well-versed in several Chinese martial arts, and that when he spoke, he took command of the conversation very easily, and he was very confident in what he said and what he performed. I think the thing I liked about Bruce Lee when I was training under Ed Parker, I was very convinced that Kempo was the art for me in Kung Fu. And I think when I met Bruce Lee, what changed, it was everything he did and performed, he proved it. And at that time I was really brainwashed toward the Kempo system. And I think Kempo is a really good system. But with Bruce Lee, what made him is his precise movement. Things he told me were not fully accepted at that time period. The footwork, the way he trained, the use of the equipment, which was very few people at that time period use equipment in the training. But I think that's the basic thing, that he was so way ahead of his time. And as I studied with him, every day I found out that he was definitely way ahead of his time, particularly for that time period. Bruce Lee was, if I can say that, if he had the drawback maybe of he was quick-tempered and a little impatient. He wanted you to get the information really, he really wanted you to get the information, period. And if you didn't learn quickly, he sometimes would go right on to the next subject matter, because in my opinion, he was actually reviewing for himself also. Because when you teach others, you kind of teach yourself. You know, the Greeks said that also, but his was like he would be teaching, and I know really he's running it through his mind, what if it's possible, and he's sort of bouncing it off on me. Everything he quoted sort of fit his martial art. When he said, be soft, yet not yielding, firm, yet not hard, he would show a technique in which he was soft, but yet he wasn't firm. He was hard, but he was actually in control of the situation. So his philosophy really matched what he said. His structure in the class was mainly what he wanted to cover for that day. And for me, the period, most of our workouts were like anywhere from 2, possibly to 3 hours. And even on the short ones, like an hour and a half, we would first go through the basics, basic footwork. Mobility was very, very important to him. So he had agility exercise, he had balancing exercise, he had coordination exercise, he had hand dexterity exercises. He had what he called economy of motion exercise. He had form practice, but not the kind of kata that you're thinking in a traditional martial art. The form is what he called the structure. He had exercises in the training for strength, for speed, for stamina, for grace, for endurance. That was Bruce Lee. He covered all the basic attributes that was needed for a fighter. And then he would go into technique. He says, you have no business in martial art if you're unable to do this, conditioning-wise. He says, if you can't do a certain amount of push-ups, he says, you have no business, because those are what he called the main attributes that help you in the martial art. You know, you can know a lot of material, but if you don't have the stamina to do it, he says, then you won't be able to do it. So he placed, I think I'm safe in saying that he placed almost 60% on physical conditioning, on attributes. The other 40% was on technical. In all honesty, he did not want to teach in the Los Angeles area, because he had run into people in the Seattle and the Oakland area where he felt they had sort of wronged him. I didn't really question him on that. So he had no intention of opening a school in Los Angeles. And at that time I said, Sifu, we really should, this is a beautiful art, you should really share it. I think people would really appreciate it, but he still didn't want to. And then about a year, maybe a year and about 3 months, he decided that he would like to open a school, but it would have to be a very selective few in Chinatown, and that he would allow me to teach a selected few. So he did bring in some of his, what I call people in the movie industry, and he brought in, he says, you can bring in people that you like to bring. So I brought in friends that I had in martial art, mainly people who were in Kempo. And then he made contacts with other people, and that's how we first started the Chinatown School. He pointed me because he felt that I believed that I could teach it. However, I made a lot of mistakes on the way and learned to teach. Because I think when you teach, you have to learn to be a good teacher. I don't think you're born with that gift. I think teachers are made just like athletes are made through the training. And you make a lot of errors on the way, which I'm sure I made a lot of errors and learned to deal with it as I was teaching. Jeet Kune Do was always an evolution. It was a work in process. It never was the same. When I first started with him, he actually taught me forms. He taught me, I remember, Southern Mantis form about 1/4 the way. He taught me a Northern Mantis form halfway. He taught me a Cholet Flat form. And that lasted for about a month, maybe a month and a half at the most. And then he would teach me basic kicking, punching. And then, of course, he would teach me Wing Chun. And then he said, okay, it's not in the form, so he started change. He would change, and I think I'm safe in saying that almost at that time, the first year he taught me, almost every month the curriculum was constantly changing, sometimes very big, sometimes very little, but it was constantly changing. It was never the same, you know. We did a lot of training. In the beginning, we did a lot of sparring, hard sparring, and then he learned how to train that so he wouldn't hurt me because literally he was way beyond my physical level. But I think I was very durable, so he liked to work with me a lot. And then he had a lot of focus glove drills, which he developed, and that was always constantly changing. In the beginning, we only used the focus glove for punching. He started to adapt it for focus glove. His changing, I introduced him to the football kicking. They didn't call it football kicking shield. We call it the kicking shield. But nobody at that time was putting things like that on the market. So I brought in a shield, foam shield, and an air shield to have him feel for kicking and for punching, which in the beginning he didn't like, and then come back the next week and he'd have a bunch of drills on the airbag and on the foam shield and on the forearm foam shield. And that's the Bruce Lee I knew. He was a work in progress, constantly experimenting, constantly researching, you know, and constantly being very creative in his structure. When I demonstrated with Bruce Lee, like my very first demonstration was right after the International. He had phoned me up and he said that Taki was going back to Seattle and he needed someone to dummy. And I said, he asked me if I would like to do it, and I said, I would love to do it. He says, and I'll teach you, and you be my demonstration partner. Well, the first thing I noticed about Bruce Lee, he never rehearsed. In Kempo, we always rehearsed to almost the 10th degree where you would fall, where you would roll, what punch you were trying to throw. And his first demonstration, you just punch and kick, and I'll take care of the rest. I go, gosh, I didn't feel comfortable. It's just, it'll come out. You just punch and kick, and I'll just take it from there. So we never really rehearse. A couple times he said, I'm going to do trapping, and that's about it. I knew that I would punch, or he would trap the hand, and I would just act natural, and I'll just take care of the rest. So that's the main thing he did. He didn't really rehearse on his demonstration, you know. And I always felt uncomfortable with that because in Kempo we always rehearse, you know. We had routines down and things like that. As he just said, well, I'll just take it from there. You just punch and kick. If I could not hold for him properly in any demonstration, he would just hit my chest. And it'll look good anyway because he's moving so fast that the crowd thought that was just probably part of the way we trained. But he was very, like I said, very spontaneous in a demonstration. He says, if you make a mistake, that's no problem. I'll just take care of it. And I did make mistakes. He just recovered and compensated from when I made the error. And throw me or sweep me or took me down. 3 punches, once in a while a lock-up. But that was Bruce Lee. He was just so spontaneous in his approach. I would say he had a natural flair for showmanship. You know, when he walked into a room, he had presence. The minute he walked in a room, he was always in control. He was like center stage, even when he wasn't trying to be center stage. So as far as showmanship, he had great ability. Like he'd do the 1-finger push-up, the thumb push-up, 2 thumbs like that, and maybe show a couple of Chinese forms. Like, it would impress me. He would do a Chinese set, and he goes, Okay, man, I said, I really like that. He says, it's no good, but I'll just show you. And then he would show it to me. He said, well, that's no good. So that he didn't do it, but that he went through that type of training, that's what impressed me also. So I call that showmanship, that he had a natural flair to do it. Even when he wasn't trying to be, he had that natural showmanship. The first thing I showed him, as I said, was the air shield and the foam shield we use in football and the forearm foam shield. And then he developed drills from that, like round kick, side kick, round kick, throw the rear hand, throw the hook, throw the rear hand, throw the hook. In that time period, I introduced him to the athletic shoe. And usually at that time period, he liked that. Prior to that time, he always trained in either a Chinese boot or what we call desert boots. And most of the times we train with desert boots. Then we started training in boxing shoes. So he says, let me see. So he took the boxing shoes and he says, let's see, what's how to do it. And then I introduced him to it's called a naval headgear. And he said, like this. So I went down to the sporting goods store and bought 5 for our group. And he liked the naval headgear. Nowadays, that would be outmoded because they got some really good stuff. But at that time, that was just like on the cutting edge of training. I introduced him to the baseball shin guard. That came about because my shins were really hurt because he would always side kick my shin, even playfully. It was very, very painful. And so I'm going to put a stop to that. So I started wearing sometimes a shin guard on the legs so that when he side kicked me, it didn't hurt. Okay. And then there wasn't any kind of protector in those days. So what I did was take 2 boxing chest protectors and put them together and let him kick me. So I introduced him to a lot of protections. He says, well, I want to be able to go all out, but I want to do it for safety. For your safety, he said, so you protect yourself as best as possible. I introduced him to a finger glove. Basically, the finger glove was used for baton training in Japan. And so he said, no, we'll cut off the fingers a little bit here. And so because he liked it, because you could grab, you could hook the hand, and then you could punch up it. So that became very popular. That became sort of like the prototype that you now see for a lot of Vale Tudo type of situation. And it's very important to remember at that time period, nobody grappled too much. He was getting into locking on the ground. Not so much grappling, but a lot of punch and kick, and then go into a kind of a locking position on the bottom. But we didn't contest it at that time period. So equipment-wise, he introduced them to like anything from a small baseball. So okay, I'll see something like this. We can use this to roll around, put your hands in and roll around, you know. So anything sport-wise that you introduced him to, he had a way to train with it. Which on medicine ball, he said, this is good. So from the basketball, I went to the medicine ball, so we did a lot of training, which now, you hand the basketball back, and we went to the medicine ball. Then he started developing things like, the only time I really got to hit him really hard was take the medicine ball and just throw it on his gut while he lay down there in this kind of a boat position like this. I could really throw it as hard as I want. In fact, I was very careful not to throw it too hard. He kept saying, no, 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 no. I want you to really throw it. So I could hit him as hard as I want. And it's the only time I could do that is just to hit him as hard. And so he took, like the basketball, but went to more or less to the medicine ball. And I just threw the medicine ball. So those are some of the things that I introduced him. And then stopwatch, the use of the stopwatches, things like that he kind of liked. Anything I showed. And then a lot of the books, I think he used a lot of it in the Tao Jeet Kune Do work because one of my majors was physical education. So a lot of the books of Currington and all the different big names in physical fitness at that time period, I just gave him a lot of the books, which he then went further and got more books on these different people. And it's pretty much anything that interests him, he would say, let's do it. And we just, from my standpoint, is that anything I showed him, he always had a different way to train on it. I introduced him to the small bag. It was made basic for kids. And I said, no, this is good for he calls it the hook kick. It's actually a round kick because our hook kicks, so it's what we call Now Tech. So he has a little small bag, which is actually for children. And he started using that to kick. and things of that nature, you know. My times alone with Bruce Lee, well, I really treasure it because they were, I was allowed to be, if I wanted to, creative. I was allowed to question if I wanted to, which was very rare in a traditional Japanese or Chinese or Korean or Okinawan system at that time period. You know, their rule was law at that time. So we did a lot of experimentation. He did a lot of experimentation. He encouraged me to do a lot of experimentation, which I liked, you know. And the process was that it just grew from there by the mistakes we made, but we found to be very successful for training. And from there on, it was just like, for me, it was like every day was like a complete, what do they call that, satori, or an awakening. Because every day was new, it was alive, it was fresh, as he called it, fresh blood in the vein. It was never rehearsed. You know, we did a lot of questioning of whether it was workable, whether it was not workable. I enjoyed that part. And he did a lot of experimenting on me, which I liked. I felt in the beginning I took a lot of shots for him. I did, when I say shots, body shots and like that. And then he learned to control that a little bit better, where I felt very comfortable. And I think he felt I was durable, so he could experiment a lot. And then he would go back and teach it to his private lessons when he started to, by what he discovered through the process of just working out. In the acting part, I don't think this is just my take and I could be wrong, I don't think he really considered himself an actor. But I think he first considers himself a martial artist before an actor. But my own observation of him, he learned to act by just studying books, watching different people. He says that he wasn't going to try to act. He says he was just going to try to be himself. And if he could be himself, then he didn't have to act. You know, he's actually acting out what he really is, or doing what he really is. So his take on acting was just to be natural. And I saw that from his 1 or 2 lines in The Green Hornet to every picture he seemed to be more relaxed. Of course, there's a lot of people who say, well, he's not an actor. I don't know about that because I don't know what a good actor is. But what he was doing was just, he said, I'm just going to express myself, and I wanted just to get across the point through action. Because he says, action is my form of acting. That's the basic line. He said, that's my form of action. It's an expression of what I do. And when I talk, it's just an expression, if he was in that situation, what he would do. For me, that was my first stunt job. And he said he wanted me to double for a mako. And it was called the praying mantis. And he says, you don't have to do the praying mantis set, but you want to look like the praying mantis. And he says, I'm going to have you double. It was very educational for me because that's my first stunt job ever. And obviously, I think I probably made a lot of mistakes on that too, but he was nice enough to not yell at me or scream at me and just let me do my thing as it progressed. When he left for Hong Kong, he told me, I'm going to be an actor. I'm going to read up, I'm going to be sort of a director. I'm going to be a cinematographer. And he started naming all these things because I've been reading up. And in my mind, I'm thinking, man, but you're a martial artist. I'm just, how are you going to learn cinematography, directing, and all the different parts, lighting and stuff like that, and just overnight, you know. And I didn't say it to him, but in my mind, I'm thinking, I don't think you're ready. And so what he did was study a lot, because he felt it was important to learn a little bit of everybody's job as to highlight his action. He also told me that it had to be more kicking than hands, because hands, you have to widen the motion up. And so that's what he did with a lot of his punching. He widened it up a little bit because it has to take time in the eyes of the camera to register. If he did all the short stuff, it wouldn't register. So he went to kicking because you could see the motion, gives it time for the stuntman to react to it. And he made really a study of it, because he realized, I think in the beginning, he tried to fight, do it like you're fighting, and you can't do it. You know, just like you can take fencers that way too. They could be very good and even collegiate champions, but it's different when you do it for theatrical fencing. And he understood that, about how to make it work, how to time it so you have a pause. He had pauses where most fight scene was. He had the pause where they go, and he would just stand like that, and then he go. So he knew how to put the pauses at the right time, and that came just by studying different people. He did it a lot by studying Japanese swordplay, and he took a lot from a lot of stuff like dramatically, how to make it more dramatic, and that came about through just studying and using a videotape to see what it would look like. For me, it was a great enjoyment, and for me, it was like, for him, because I know it accomplished what he wanted to accomplish. It was a big thing, so I was happy because he was happy that he had gotten to. I didn't really think, this is funny when I look back, because I really didn't think. I know he always was a good martial artist, but I didn't think, and people said, well, he's not an actor, he's never going to make it. And it's really nice to see a person make it, even though he might not have been the greatest actor in the world, but he had definitely had presence on the screen. He was dynamic, and I knew he could do a lot of things for real, so that made it even more enjoyable to watch him get to that level. The only thing I remember about the Big Boss is he said he's working with a lot of Thai people, and he thought that was kind of interesting. He had a Thai champion there, and he thought it would be nice to, because he could research a little bit there too, and he could also make a film there. So the only thing I really remember about the Big Boss is that he's had a lot of Thai people on the set, and he said he'd like to make a good picture. But my opinion on the Fist of Fury, this is where he really wanted to promote the Chinese culture. That he was not the sick man of Asia, and that's the lines were, I think, were well fitted, because that's what he was always trying to teach, that there's another part of the Chinese culture that people had not ever seen. Well, he was just ecstatic. He said, well, this picture topped it, and he was just very bubbly over the situation. And he says, I'm going to make it better. The next one, I'm going to make it. I'll top that one too. And he wanted to do that because it brought out the Chinese image. That was his big concern, because he didn't think it was a good image, especially in the Western world with he said the pigtails and with their hands folded through the jacket like that. It's too much of a stereotype. And so he wanted to break that stereotype of the Chinese. And he thought that by doing a Chinese martial art, people would appreciate the Chinese culture. And if they could appreciate the Chinese culture, he says, it's a good connection and appreciation of other cultures. And so I'm just doing my small part, to educate the public. He was always in the thing that films could educate faster than anything. He says you could write a book. He said that there was no videotapes in those days, but he says you could write a book, a booklet or a book. He says, and that doesn't really educate, but one film can educate you. Whether it's the facts are true or not, it educates and people remember it. So I can educate faster through the film than I can through teaching. And I remember that part so he says this film is going to do it. It's going to educate people on the Chinese and have a different image, he said, for the Chinese. On the way of the dragon, I think he was trying. That's one of the lessons there. One of the lessons was that he wanted to show the broken rhythm that he was losing, and then when he started using the broken rhythm, that he would regain his proficiency. The other thing is when he tried to show by honoring that there was respect, even to the person. That's why he put the gi over Chuck Norris, and that was a sign of respect, that even though a warrior pays tribute to a warrior, even though he's defeated him. I worked with Bruce Lee on the Game of Death, and they're very educational for me because, again, he says, just be yourself. And he coached me on my scenes and my few lines that I had. And in the fight scenes, we just went back and forth. He established what I should do, what I shouldn't do. And I found him to be a very, very patient coach for me when I was first getting into the business. The bottom floor was supposed to be guarded by karate. And this changed many, many times. The second floor, at least when I was going through, he says, will be guarded by a person very proficient in something like praying mantis. And the third floor would be a kicking system and a throwing system. And then the fifth floor, but he changed the floors. I thought it was supposed to be a weaponry floor, which he wanted me to take care of. And then the last floor was the floor of the unknown, which is he uses Kareem Jabbar as. It has no style. It's the style of the unknown. At each floor, he has to learn how to solve the problem of fighting with that particular plot. And for me, he just called me. He said, "Would you love to play it?" And at the time I was teaching school, I asked my principal, could I take off for 2 months? And he said, well, you're not going to get paid. So I did that. I took off for 2 months and went to Hong Kong. And he says, I'll make sure that you're taken care of, and you can make the picture from there, and then you can maybe put your input, and that might be good. And that's how it started. When we were filming in the New Territories, that was to establish my character as a kind of a disciplinarian and very, very strict with it and harsh to his students. That's why he has me do a lot of different things and sort of be a little bit too abusive with the people I'm working out. That was to establish my character. So we filmed in the New Territories and we shot shots there, but no one seems to find that footage, you know. And I don't know if that was just for that just segment there, and no one seems to have it. But I remember filming, and I remember shooting a lot of photos for advertisement or commercials for that particular partner. But I do remember it was filmed in New Territories. He was behind the film. He always coached me how my posture should be, the kind of attitude I should have, you know, and. He just coached me every place. He said, "No, I don't like that. You look like you're slopped over." And he has me going through different postures he thought that would be more appropriate to the character I was playing. Robert Lee was very nice to give that as a gift to me. And it was a picture with his voice in the background telling me, "No, that doesn't look good. No, put it at that angle. No. Try it at this angle. You should know. That doesn't look too good. That looks not strong enough." So that will never go for. He would just coach me every place, and he would have me do the technique over and over and over again. And I think that it ran about seemed like 20 minutes of it, which Robert said I could use, but be careful who you give it to, and et cetera, et cetera. When Robert showed me, then I do remember him coaching me. You know, you should do this, you should do that. Slow it down a little bit. It's going to go off the camera at that angle, and says, "No, this is not dynamic enough." Things like that he would stress and talk while I was performing with the sticks or either with the nunchucks. I think I was in Hong Kong when Weintraub came over. I believe I was in Hong Kong, and he told me this. He thought it would be really good, and that he would probably postpone the work on his own project, Game of Death, and probably go with Warner Brothers on this particular picture they're working on. And he's very excited about it, working with the caliber of people that were going to be in the picture. That's what I remember about it. And turned out to be pretty good by most people's opinion. I think I was in Hong Kong when Weintraub came over. I believe I was in Hong Kong, and he told me this. He thought it would be really good, and that he would probably postpone the work on his own project, Game of Death, and probably go with Warner Brothers on this particular picture they're working on. And he's very excited about it, working with the caliber of people that were going to be in the picture. That's what I remember about it. And turned out to be pretty good by most people's opinion. It was my 28th or 29th birthday, I can't remember now. But he said, "Let's work out." So we worked out, we sparred, we worked out. And he said, let's work out, let's spar right now. So the last part was the sparring again. And I remember him hitting me in the bread basket and just laughing. And I'm laying on the ground because I'm really out of wind. And he kept on laughing. I said, "Boy, this is kind of unusual. That was really a hard shot, and I can't grab it." So he brought this birthday cake out, and he said, "Wayne," which was Wayne Chan. bring out the birthday cake. He brings his birthday cake out. The candles are all lit, and he starts to sing happy birthday. His voice wasn't the best voice. He starts singing happy birthday to me. I was laying on the ground, and he says, I just want to do that for your birthday. And that's what I remember him about that. The other thing I thought was kind of comical for me one time in the Zeiler & Zeiler store, he asked me one time, where do all the young kids buy their clothes? And of course, he was always a very dapper dresser. So he went to Zeiler & Zeiler. So we go to Zeiler & Zeiler, and this guy starts, for some odd reason, starts touching him. He kept thinking, man, these are real nice threads. Where'd you get these nice threads like that? And this goes on for 15 minutes. So he keeps handling him. Of course, he doesn't like people to handle him. And he says, I do Kung Fu. And the guy goes, what's Kung Fu? And he says, let me show you. This is called the 1-inch punch. And I'm going, oh, he's not really going to do that to him here, is he? And I remember him doing that 1-inch punch like this, and the guy goes sailing into the clothes rack with a sport jackets on, his feet are up in the air, and I go, oh gosh, this is not going to be good. Because the chair that he was supposed to hit, he went toppled over, he went over. And I didn't think anything of it, and I thought, hey, let's see if we ought to go now. So we left. I come back 3 months later on, and the guy who was doing the clothing store says, don't you ever bring that guy back here again. My fondest memories of Bruce Lee would be just the training. My fondest memories would be the walks we did in Hollywood and going to different old bookstores, getting old used books on different subject matters that interest. My fondest memory of Bruce Lee was just eating. A lot of it was eating, walking in Hollywood, and working out. Those are my fondest memories. My other fondest memory, once when he tricked me and I was looking at a pair of weights, which was, at that time I was not financially able to buy it. And he goes, you like that? And I go, yeah. He says, hey, well, that's nice. Then he walked back and says, I'm going to buy this for Brandon. I didn't think anything of it, but Brandon was still very young. So it was about only, what, 120-pound assembly of different weights. And I remember him buying it, and then as he stopped at my house, he says, actually, I bought it for you. I don't want you to have it. Just work out, but it wasn't for Brandon. That's one of my fondest memories. Probably the other fondest memory I had is when we went to this fancy Japanese restaurant, and I brought $100 thinking that would be enough. And I remember when I saw the bill, it was over $100, and I go, oh gosh, I only have $100. And I guess he kind of knew it, because I guess he said my face turned red, and he tapped me in the leg underneath me, and nobody knew it. And he handed me some extra money, a couple of 20s, so I could finish the bill. And I said, how did you know, Sifu? He says, your face turned red when you saw the bill. That's my fondest memory, and no one knew about it. You know, my wife didn't know about it, and I don't think Linda knew about it. And then I thought that's one of my fondest memories that I had of him. He was so generous to the point. Many times when I was with him, my other fondest memory is that as a student, you're supposed to pay for your Sifu. But I think the more times he paid for me, which I thought was very unusual, he said, no, I'll pay for it. And he would pay for the meal, which I thought was very different, because I always try to pay for it, but he always seemed to be, he said, no, I'll pay for it. Another fondest memory I had, I remember when he wasn't doing too well financially, and he said to go out to lunch. So we'd go out to lunch, and what we had was peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and soup. That was it. So I have a lot of fond memories of him being with him. You know, I remember the hits. Those are fond memories, because I learned being hit what I was doing wrong. So I probably would think of 100 things more, but at the time my memory's kind of limited. As you get older, your memory's not as sharp as it is, right? But those are, I think, the key things in my life. Just walking with him down Hollywood into the used bookstores, and going into the health food store, because health food stores in those days was Bud Thompson's school. And they were just very rare. And we look over to see what was the latest thing in nutrition, and I enjoyed that part. I would think that what Bruce's contribution to the martial art is that everything is in constant change. Even principles can be questioned. That's why one of his famous sayings was, know the principle, follow the principle, dissolve the principle. Know the rule, follow the rule, dissolve the rule. You know, and I think what I learned from him, and I think what he taught the martial art world, is that growth is constant. Nothing is stagnant. Things change, and if you don't change, you're not on the cutting edge. What could be so efficient at this decade would be not efficient in even 10 years. What is the cutting edge in nutrition? Might not be the cutting edge in nutrition. What is the cutting edge in physical fitness? Will change. What they consider was good for training the abs in one decade might not be, in the next decades might be just obsolete. And what I learned from him was just change is necessary. And if you don't change, you don't survive. And then I think what I learned from him is giving 100% of what you really are. Because unless you give 100% of what you are, you don't really express the art. Not to copy anyone, to be yourself, to really truly express yourself, because every individual has their own expression of the art. He often used the word, a lot of singers, he was using Elvis Presley, he says, there's only one Elvis Presley, you can imitate him, but you're not Elvis Presley. Therefore, you want to create your own character, your own goal, and set out and be happy. He used to use the term walk on. He said, Dad, if you walk on, you make a mistake, and learn to live with your mistakes and to move on, never to look back when you made a mistake. And I think this is the greatest things I think he left. I'll use the word legacy. His best legacy was that, just to be inspirational, because if you're inspirational to one person, you might be only one person you think, but you're inspiration to many. Therefore, it makes a better world to live in. So, as corny as it sounds, but it really is true. But I think that's his legacy that he left to the martial art world. I like to think he did.